We are trained Marxists.
And maybe I'm sharing too much, but we become very intimate with the spirits that we call on regularly.
Hashtags are, for us, are way more than a hashtag. It is literally almost resurrecting a spirit so they can work through us to get the work that we need to get done.
This presentation will serve as my definitive statement about race relations in Western society. I'm going to take some samples from the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, speaking about their occult origins and methodologies, and juxtapose those with statements from some popular critics of the movement, whom I happen to think are functioning as a type of controlled opposition. In the second half, I will break down what I think is going on and add some commentary.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
And maybe I'm sharing too much, but we become very intimate with the spirits that we call on regularly, right? Like each of them seems to have a different presence and personality. You know, I laugh a lot with Waukesha, you know, and I didn't meet her in her body, right? I met her through this work.
It's a very important practice. Hashtags are, for us, are way more than a hashtag. It is literally almost resurrecting a spirit so they can work through us to get the work that we need to get done. I started to feel personally connected and responsible and accountable to them, both from a deeply political place, but also from a deeply spiritual place. it's so important, not just for us to be in direct relationship to our people who've passed, but also for them to know we've remembered them. I believe so many of them work through us.
Black Lives Matter is ran by 3 witches who are lesbian witches: Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opa Tometi. She's of Nigerian descent. They are all 3 are part of the Black Boule Secret Society, and there are witches, they're warlocks, in the entire spiritual dogma or doctrine of Black Lives Matter is from the West African religion called Odu Ifa, capital O-D-U, then spacing capital I-F-A. But over 3,000 different religions in Africa, or Akibalon, is rooted in witchcraft and divination.
I feel like in our traditional practice, and people who practice, traditions from West African places, one of the big things is remembering your ancestors. And I feel like part of the story in the building of BLM was about remembering and remembering our people, not based off of a white supremacist memory, which would be about, slandering them and putting their names in the newspaper and showing their mugshots, but instead remembering them from the place that their mothers and their fathers and their family would want us to remember them in, even if we didn't know them personally.
So these 3 witches, Alicia Garza, Opa Tometi, and Patrice Cullors, are using the psyop of the witchcraft religion of Odu Ifa, which concentrates on 16 points of demonic possession and demonic influence through demonic performance of what? Libations. Because the term libation means the liquid of darkness.
When we come out into the streets and we pray, the first thing that we do when we hear of a murder is we come out, we pray, we pour libation, we build with the community where the person's life was stolen. And it took almost a year for me to realize that this movement is much more than a racial and social justice movement. At its core, it's a spiritual movement. When we say the names, right? So we speak their names, we say her name, say their names. We do that all the time, that you kind of invoke that spirit, and then those spirits actually become present with you, right?
Say my name, no one is around you.
So, like when you're getting ready to go on stage and perform, does Sasha Fierce, when does she show up?
Usually when I hear the crowd, when I put on my stilettos, when like the moment right before when you're nervous and that other thing kind of takes over for you. Then Sasha Fierce appears, and my posture and the way I speak and everything is different.
But no, is it like a process that happens too? Like you were talking about the high heels, like once the lashes go on and the makeup and all that stuff.
It's kind of like when I do a movie, becoming the character. Once you put on the wig and once you put on the clothes, you walk different. It's kind of this character that I've created over the years.
And how is Sasha Fierce different than I am?
Well, I know, definitely wearing that bodysuit. I could never walk out here and do that.
Does Sasha Fierce ever go home? Like,
sometimes, but not often. Only on special occasions.
She ever show up and shows up sometimes at the house.
But definitely when I'm nervous or whenever I have to perform, whenever I have to do choreography or something that's difficult, and it's no different from anyone else. I feel like we all kind of have that thing that takes over when it's...
Say my name.
We speak their names, we say her name, say their names. We do that all the time, that you kind of invoke that spirit, and then those spirits actually become present with you, right?
Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Now call out your ancestors into the room, loud so we can hear you. Ella Baker. It only took us 5 minutes to shift the energy in this space together.
Okay, my name is Tupac Shakur, and I attend Tamalpais High School, and I'm 17 years old.
It only took us 5 minutes to shift the energy in this space together.
How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Khan-Cullors. I'll talk about that name, Khan, in a minute. But Patrisse Khan-Cullors has purchased a $1.4 million home out there in Los Angeles. To be specific, she's in Topanga Canyon. This is like right in between Calabasas, which is where Kim Kardashian and Kanye West lived in their, $30 million, $60 million mansion in Malibu. So you're right there in between Calabasas, Malibu, and the hills of Los Angeles. All right. Now, my question is, how does this quote unquote activist afford a $1.4 million estate? It's not even in her name. It's in the name of her quote unquote corporate entity. Which corporate entity is that? Okay, how was it funded? Is it funded through Black Lives Matter, going through the United States, tearing stuff up, destroying businesses, destroying lives, destroying people, running things down to the ground? Is it built off of that money? That's what it appears to be to me. Here's one story I covered a while back. Remember this? Remember this right here with the wings? This person in this fat suit, she's not nude. I'm not sure if that's a fat suit or whatever, but anyway, she's not nude. She has some kind of suit covering her body with these really strange wings or just decay and ruin. Now that I look at it, this looks like, matter of fact, let's go. This looks like the ruins of a building, like an actual structure, construction debris, and you have this fat angel with wings of other pieces of construction debris. That's what it appears like to me. So it's like you are rising from the ashes of destruction as some type of deity, some type of being to be worshipped. And that's kind of when it seems like over with Black Lives Matter. That's kind of what's going on. Now, I did a little bit of research to figure out, okay, is this lady married? Does she have any kids? I think she does have kids. And she's married to this person right here who is named Jamala Khan. So I think that's where that name comes from. Your name was Patrisse Cullors. Now it's Patrisse Khan-Cullors. Kind of strange, but whatever. So this is her gender non-conforming spouse, bride, husband, brusband. Not really sure what to call this person. I don't want to get anybody offended or triggered at butthurt or using the wrong pronouns. Janaya Khan is Patrisse's spouse, and I think they will live in this Los Angeles home together. Now, here is a quick little picture of the estate. I guess you would call it that. Not really a compound. It's kind of modest, 1.4. That's light work in LA. I like the paneling on the ceiling. Nice skylight up there. That's nice. Really secure. No bars on these doors, huh? No bars on these windows or in the glass sliding doors. No need for bars on that like you have in South LA where all the community resides, right, Patrisse?
All right, check it out.
Kimberly, I want to ask you about Black Lives Matter, and look, I doubt that you're going to be surprised by this. Maybe you are, I don't know. To me, it's a racist movement. It's triggered so much violence and mayhem. Its finances and some of its fundraising is actually managed by an activist group, 1,000 Currents, which is sponsored by a charity set up by the Kellogg's founder of your breakfast cereal. it has a woman, Susan Rosenberg, sitting on its board of directors, on deputy head, once arrested for her ties to a radical left terrorist group responsible for killing police and bombing. Here she is.
I just never stopped wanting to make revolution, but I was in possession of explosives and weapons when I was arrested in 1984.
Now, Rosenberg was sentenced to 53 years prison, was pardoned after 13 by President Bill Clinton's last day in office, now helping Black Lives Matter. What does that tell you?
Well, I think it's not appropriate to have someone who is a convicted terrorist on a board of an organisation that, you know, one of its aims, stated aims, is to engage in peaceful protest against police brutality against African Americans. So I think it is inappropriate, partly because of what she did. I mean, it is inexcusable really what she did. But I think also because it would overshadow any message that organisation is trying to put out, or its aims that it's trying to achieve. So I think there are many people who could contribute to that movement, and I think, you know, to overshadow it with someone like Susan Rosenberg is really, it's not appropriate.
But to that point, James, one is there's Rosenberg, Marxist, convicted, terrorism offences. One of the three co-founders was on tape. We played it on this show, saying they were trained Marxists themselves. It's hardly like she's, you know, you've got this pure movement over here and just this one person who's a you know, bad look over there. I think it's a real problem, and I just wonder why so many people bend the knee to a movement led by such extremists.
Probably, Andrew, because most people are well-intentioned. Black Lives Matter as a standalone concept is an intuitively appealing thing. Of course, Black Lives Matter, and of course there have been problems with police violence in the United States and elsewhere in the world, including in Australia. But the Black Lives Matter movement has very quickly transformed to be much more than that. It's effectively been colonised by the far left in politics. They have much more radical aims than just standing up for the rights of black citizens of the United States, who want to dismantle the police, who want to redistribute wealth, who have wacky ideas about justice and reparations, and fundamentally changing the character of the United States of America. And yet, many people in big companies and the media elsewhere are still attached to that initial healing concept and sympathetic concept and haven't kept up to date with what it's really become. And I think probably are fearful of taking on what it has become, because others will say, well, then you're against Black lives, and you say that Black lives don't matter.
you and I weren't the only people on Twitter. That story was all over the place.
It still is.
Yo, did they suspend everybody?
No.
Oh my God, that is fucking spectacular.
Are looking live at Minneapolis. Security is near the 3rd precinct as the sun is starting to come up after a night of riots.
Parts of the city on fire overnight. A shot from our ABC camera there. We have a look at a Domino's pizza that was just burning, still smoking right now. So much chaos in the city after another night of violent demonstrations.
Get his arm! Get his arm!
He died because he had a radio! Only one of his pictures on the wall and he died!
Shout what you gotta say!
Angry protesters also breaching a police station overnight. You're looking at the 3rd precinct in flames.
Incredible images there. The front page of the Star Tribune in Minnesota saying, "State of agony." This as more protests erupt overnight in American cities. The anger growing across the country from New York to Denver to Los Angeles following the death of George Floyd in police custody.
Good morning, Michael. The situation here is still very active. I want to show you what it looks like. Take a look behind me here. You can see some of these state authorities here working to keep the peace. And in the distance, those flashing lights, you might see that fire truck. They're working to put out a fire there. Now, if you look right over here, a lot of buildings like this one reduced simply to a shell. Buildings and cars on fire, thick black smoke filling the sky as protesters demanding justice for George Floyd clash with police. Some demonstrators smashing windows of this police precinct, officers on the roof firing smoke and flashbang grenades. The crowd dispersed, but then returned and stormed the precinct, police evacuating as protesters set fire to the building. Many watching the building go up in flames as the city of Minneapolis warned of unconfirmed reports that gas lines of the 3rd precinct have been cut and other explosives are in the building, pleading please retreat in the event the building explodes. The city's mayor declaring a state of emergency. Minnesota's governor activating the National Guard to try and maintain order, sending 500 soldiers to the area. One person allegedly attempted to take an officer's gun from their holster. Protesters gathering around the country, a rally outside this police station in Los Angeles. And in Columbus, Ohio, people storming the State House, smashing windows. And in Columbus, Ohio, people storming the State House, smashing windows.
Of people who've been charged so far, some who are just there on the property to take selfies and to be part of what they thought was just a moment, but then there's also this much more sophisticated layer that it seems investigators are really just scratching the surface of.
Look, it's a PR war, okay? You have to understand it's an IO war. We can't lose the IO war. We're better than that. Information operation.
There's gotta be something in here we can fucking use against these scumbags.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Symbols, Patterns, and Gnosis. I'm Jason Bickford. As the name implies, I like to take a close look at symbols and patterns through a particularly esoteric Christian lens. And we're going to be looking at some of the information I just shared with you. So I'm going to provide some commentary after juxtaposing all those clips. And essentially what we have here is what I've been calling for some time now, manufactured polarization. And we have a massive media monopoly-wide game being played on the general public. The blame game, we could call it. I'd like to buy a couple vowels there with BLM. Blame game or blam game? If you only have one vowel, I guess maybe you might be jealous of the people who have two. We're looking at the West African occult origins of Black Lives Matter, as well as their connections to leftist, predominantly lesbian terrorist organizations. You heard that correctly. A lot of people don't know about the radical lesbian terrorists of the radical left. M19 was the name of one of the groups, and they were an offshoot of the Weathermen. And these are radical Marxists, or so they claim. They make a lot of money and own a lot of corporate entities as far as Marxist goes, but we'll talk about that a little later. So this was M19 was a female-run communist terrorist party, and that's in line with most of the domestic terrorism over the past 100 years. It's been predominantly leftist. You've heard a couple Black Lives Matter founders in conversation. Patrice Kahn Cullors described herself and the rest of the Black Lives Matter founders as trained Marxists. And they also went into detail about the methodology of manifesting spirits of dead ancestors through a process that is based on West African occultism. These sound like slanderous comments coming from critics. I would be a little skeptical hearing about this stuff if it didn't come from the founders themselves. Some of you might be thinking, what the heck does the January 6th Capitol insurrection have to do with Black Lives Matter? That was Trump supporters, right? What I'm suggesting here is that these movements and these events are organized at the very least by the same spirit, by the same spiritual and egoist impetus, if not actually being organized by the same governmental agencies. And what's most telling is the difference in the reportage from the mainstream media describing one event as angry protests and other events as essentially domestic terrorism that demands a federal investigation. The main difference I could see between Occupy Wall Street and Occupy White House was the language coming from the media. We also see that the Black Lives Matter movement is inciting riots. And much of this involves action that, I believe, if it were undertaken by people who identified as politically conservative, it would be described as domestic terrorism, and very often rightfully so. I believe if you're bringing bombs to either a mom-and-pop liquor store or a police station or a government building with the intent of burning down buildings and blowing things up and destroying your neighborhood, that is, in effect, domestic terrorism. We saw less damage done physically by the Boston Marathon bombing. But if you bomb a local government building and then light a bunch of independent businesses on fire, the media describes that, if you're leftist, as angry protests. So we have a bit of a language-based game going on here. The media is using language that contradicts the video footage. They're downplaying what is anarchy and domestic terrorism. Meanwhile, so-called Christians are using hyperbolic and obnoxious modes of speaking in order to make the truth about the occult origins of Black Lives Matter sound like a ridiculous fallacy.
Black Lives Matter is ran by 3 witches who are lesbian witches. Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opa Tometi. She's of Nigerian descent. They are all 3 are part of the Black Boule Secret Society. And there are witches, there are warlocks in the entire spiritual dogma or doctrine of Black Lives Matter is from the West African religion called Odu Ifa, capital O-D-U, then spacing capital I-F-A. But over 3,000 different religions in Africa, or Akibalon, is rooted in witchcraft and divination.
I'm personally alarmed and concerned by what I hear about coming from the Black Lives Matter founders themselves, speaking about a kind of collective co-creation to bring about the spirits of dead ancestors that essentially have a score to settle. However, this concept sounds obnoxious to me when I listen to this apparent pastor. Apparently he's got a church full of people listening to that shit every week. I had to tune out after just a couple minutes of listening to that guy. His mode of speaking and the information is delivered in such a way as to make the truth sound obnoxious.
So these three witches, Alicia Garza, Opa Tameti, okay, and Patrice Cullors, are using the psyop of the witchcraft religion of Odu Ifa, which concentrates on 16 points of demonic possession and demonic influence through demonic performance of what? Libations. Because the term libation means the liquid of darkness.
And that's what did it for me. He's making shit up there. Libation doesn't mean dark liquid. It comes from the Latin word libatio, which means to pour out. And it's worth noting that throughout the Old Testament, Scripture describes people as pouring libations for God, or Yahweh, however you want to take a look at that. Jewish mysticism involves libations. So there is a systematic misrepresentation of concerns about the occultism behind Black Lives Matter. I think the most damning evidence here is the words of the founders themselves. It's been noted here in this article from The Atlantic with an interesting name, Sigil Samuel. Young black women are leaving Christianity and embracing African witchcraft in digital covens. And that's what we're talking about with the hashtags. I think it's also worth noting here, and I've mentioned this in the past, that very often the cheerleaders for this movement are young, impressionable, unprofessional, B-list actors, and most of the men appear to be homosexual. So we have the sons and daughters of Prince Hall Freemasonry and the elite blacks that make up the old guard of Hollywood, of black Americans in Hollywood. And these actors are very often used as cheerleaders in order to lead lower class blacks into self-destruction. That's what gangster rap was all about. That was suburban black prep school kids acting like thugs. Many of them were closeted homosexuals. What does that have to do with anything? Well, who cares if they're gay, right? Well, I'm pointing out that the elite minds that orchestrate this are different from the young black men who perform it. And they're organizing something under a false guise. And so we have disenfranchised young black individuals who do not feel at home in the low-income black hoods. And they're alienated by their own people because of the way they are. And so they're adopted by a system which essentially turns them into actors and agent provocateurs who are enticing the very young black men who alienated them into paths of self-destruction. And so, I mean, there's only so many slices of the pie, so they're going to get the lower class N-words to fight amongst themselves. They spelled out the tactics in the Godfather movie, and young black men were seen as animals who were going to sell each other drugs and destroy each other. And they watch that movie and idolize the gangsters and go and do the exact same thing that they were discriminated against for doing. It's kind of like a bad spell is placed on these people. And we've got agent provocateurs like this guy here with his 1776 hat. I think many of these professional black conservatives don't really represent the black Americans that are kind of sick and tired of the white saviors in the Democratic Party. So we have, again, a small class of elite blacks that are leading through misinformation and provocation young, impressionable black people into particular paths. And the ones that buy into the Black Lives Matter are playing the blame game, and they are resurrecting spirits. They don't have to involve themselves in witchcraft. They're talking about using hashtags and collective mind control. They get caught up in the spirit and ideology of the age. It has more to do with psychology than supernatural forces, but I believe very often these things are intrinsically entwined, and the Christians who talk about it are full of shit. So listen to this guy here use some trigger words and do the exact thing he says he doesn't want to do.
Spouse, bride, husband, not really sure what to call this person. I don't want to get anybody offended or triggered at butthurt or using the wrong pronouns.
So he's doing exactly what the agent provocateurs within the black conservative movement are doing. Basically, if you're a black individual who's waking up to the fact that liberal policies and the Democrats are racist and they do not have your back and they're essentially bad for black people, when you wake up to that and then you start listening to black conservatives, they're going to use trigger words, insensitive language, and they're going to uphold paradigms that you can't get with. Ultimately, the idea is basically to make you feel like you don't have any place, that there's no middle ground. You either have to be homophobic and antagonistic or just get down with the welfare and stay in your lane funding Kool-Aid that the Democrats want for black people. They essentially cherry pick exceptional blacks out of their neighborhoods and then keep everybody else on stay in your lane funding. And they're leeching black communities of exceptional individuals instead of empowering them in their own neighborhoods to lift those neighborhoods up. Meanwhile, the low-class blacks who are triggered by the hashtag Kool-Aid and the mainstream media paradigms go out and light shit on fire. So black-owned businesses are not safe from this chaos. These guys can't even spell right. I mean, is this how you pay tribute to George Floyd? Like, I mean, as far as graffiti goes, that's not even graffiti art. That's just scribbling on a rooftop. Can you hear us now? Well, only if you're in a helicopter. I mean, some of this stuff is just so stupid. You realize that most of this action is perpetrated by the most impressionable minds. Meanwhile, we have a case here with Susan Rosenberg, which directly ties Black Lives Matter at the funding level to radical leftist terrorists. Susan Rosenberg was convicted and sentenced to 54 years in prison, but on the last day of his presidency, she was acquitted by Bill Clinton. So we have an untouchable slogan. Literally, you can't be against Black Lives Matter, or it sounds like you're saying Black Lives don't matter. When you point out that Black Lives Matter is anti-Christian family and wants to tear down the structures of community and is also Marxist, they're giving you plenty of things to be in opposition to, not the existence or spiritual validity and humanity of black people. And these are tactics that were used within the lesbian community, who wanted to tear down the sexist, misogynistic patriarchy. So essentially, the spirit that's being resurrected here with psychology is a spirit of revenge. And we find that in the anti-heroes of the day, whether it's, Wolverine or Batman or the Avengers or a lot of other, masculine heroes, and even women are taking up this guise now too. I think, the Black Widow movie is a perfect example. The Avengers are literally named after the spirit of vengeance. And that is the opposite of the spirit of love and forgiveness, which was promoted by Christ. We see a lot of overlap between the tactics of Malcolm X and the modern Black Lives Matter movement. The iconography of M19 spells Black Lives Matter, BLM. The iconography is the exact same ingredients, except we have a lowercase b, or not capital. So they remove the capital, and then they can have their way. Do you see how that works? The iconography of M19 and BLM is like a bad spell, which embeds information in the same way that Jewish mysticism, which also used libations in a spirit of vengeance and a spirit of weaponized victimhood to get what they want, we see that encoded within the iconography of the movement. So Black Lives Matter without the capital B is M19. We have black critics in social media who are deplatformed and censored for offering sensible criticism of Marxism and the hypocrisy of a so-called Marxist founder of Black Lives Matter having a multi-million-dollar corporate entity which she used to buy a home outside Calabasas, not far from Kim and Kanye. So this so-called dark occultism from West India that Black Lives Matter is using looks more like sophisticated psychological manipulation. And I want to suggest that the spiritual and the psychological here have an overlap. And we're looking at the dominoes set up in place by the media and the paradigms, and then they all fall down. And the media is encouraging particularly black people, but young and impressionable people in general, to do the wrong thing. This is the Spike Lee effect. Spike Lee spelled out what's happening now in his mid-'80s movie, Do the Right Thing. Infamously one of Barack Obama's favorite movies, and it's what he took Michelle Obama to see on their first date before they got married. And now we have Spike Lee basically gave the Bed-Stuy region of Brooklyn a facelift, repainted all these buildings, and then put everybody in these kind of Easter pastel, brightly colored clothes, and made the community look more vibrant and successful than it was, and then they tore it all down. Here we see Dr. King has lost his crown, and he's shaking hands with Malcolm X. This is symbolically, something I'll get into a little later, the weaponization of the civil rights movement. What we have here, and you see like the green outline, we've got X and the King, so they're kind of collectively put together. There's some green boogers coming out of the white man's nose. He's the booger man. And this character here is retarded. He's developmentally, cognitively disabled. These are the people that are going to light the fires. So essentially what Spike Lee is saying is Mookie, who plays both sides of the fence, he dates a Puerto Rican girl, he's black, he works for the Italians, so he's in league with several different ethnic groups, and he is the agent provocateur who sets it off. And then they use the retards in order to light the fire. And then they destroy their own neighborhood. So the black people thought they were pretty bad off. Well, now one of them's dead, and Radio Raheem himself is named after the radio. If you're not into hip-hop, you're definitely not going to be into the Public Enemy music. It's loud, cacophonous, and when he blasts it out of the speakers, he's essentially asking for trouble, right? He's a provocateur. He goes around, big, menacing, looks angry, and plays his loud music and pisses everybody off, and then makes his demands. So already he's made a bad impression, and then he makes a demand. Instead of just coming in and politely talking to the Italian pizza shop owners saying like, hey, can we get some pictures of some black leaders up on the wall? So that's what the whole chaos was about, was that the Italian pizza shop owners created a pizza shop, they sell pizza, and they put their own people, Italians and Italian Americans, pictures up on the wall. The black people come in, blast in Public Enemy, and say they want black people on the wall. I would say to them, make your own fucking pizza shop and put whoever you want up on the wall. I mean, you've got the freedom to do that. But instead, they'd rather give the money to the Italians and then burn the place down when they don't get what they want. And all along, we've got agent provocateurs like Spike Lee and the character of Mookie playing both sides of the fence. And the media is reframing this domestic terrorism of the left as basically angry protests. And they're paying lip service to the ideologies. What this boils down to is basically what Spike Lee was doing with Do the Wrong Thing. He's making the wrong thing look good, right? It's called Do the Right Thing. And it culminates in the action, which is the wrong thing, which is terrorism and arson. So we're told that this is a sophisticated terrorist organization here. These helmet-wearing morons snapping pictures of the daily itineraries. There's got to be something in here we could use against these scumbags. These guys seem disorganized, There's a couple agent provocateurs leading them around. They got their helmets on. The professional media was already inside the Capitol building to get pictures of the craziest idiots here. So something doesn't look right. Something stinks there. So the media makes these guys look like terrorists when they're disorganized young people who showed up for a party and then someone cracked the doors open to the White House. So we've got Occupy White House is bad, Occupy Wall Street is good. The media is making terrorism look cool while also telling you that police departments like the ones in Portland, Oregon, not only don't prosecute the terrorists and the agitators and the protesters and the rioters, but they also back them up rhetorically. So my main point is Reverend Martin Luther King's systematic approach to nonviolent resistance to government and societal oppression of Black Americans was a movement and method which made tremendous gains, but was ultimately cut short. His was a movement that placed at its center the inherent dignity, civility, and humanity of blacks as oppressed people in general. This philosophy was, in King's lifetime, and subsequently after his murder, undermined by social agitators like Malcolm X and his followers. Today, descendants of X live on in radical leftist movements who for decades have co-opted the visage and name of Dr. King while employing tactics more akin to the religion of Islam and the militant message of X. The subsequent violence within and born from these ideological movements has undermined the integrity of black people and eliminated the shame oppressive bigots have felt looking in the faces of dignified, nonviolent black resistors and protesters. By encouraging the oppressed black communities into what now amounts to domestic terrorism and the racist harassment of all white people, whether in the streets, at Sunday brunch, or within the humanities department classrooms of colleges and universities, BLM, Antifa, and affiliated groups seem to be centered not on creating anything new and beneficial, despite their rhetoric, but childishly lashing out and destroying everything in their path in the name of some form of justified rage. Rage as a verb is impossible for those who have self-control. When rage moves from a reflexive emotion to become action by way of loss of mental and spiritual faculty, the subsequent behavior being broadcast to hundreds of millions of people through scandalizing gas-on-fire media seemingly justifies the bias and bigotry of individuals who ultimately give voice and reason to the oppressor. These polarized groups feed off of each other and create a negative feedback loop. In this sense, Donald Trump is the best thing to happen to resentful leftists, because they need their boogeyman. The spirit of Christianity at the heart of Dr. King's movement has been co-opted, mutated, and put in service of the anti-Christian Muslim spirit professed by individuals like Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan. Antifa dresses up like ISIS for a reason they may not be able to articulate themselves. One does certainly not have to buy into the official narrative of the events of September 11th in order to see that clearly Islam is unique among the major world religions and that it demands a worldwide caliphate by means of force and submission. Based on what is now several thousand hours of research on the subject, I've come to the conclusion that the events of September 11th involved something not of this world, and the disclosure of exactly what happened would likely provide the impetus for worldwide chaos. We are, I believe, better off with a factually false official story that embeds for those with eyes to see the supernatural and spiritual warfare behind the attacks. One does not have to take Shahada and become a Muslim outright in order to pay lip service to and fulfill the needs of the anti-Christian spirit behind that religion. In fact, Islam itself is not the problem. It's but an elaborate subterfuge that gives rise to the spirit behind it. That spirit can also be found in Antifa, Black Lives Matter, even the Proud Boys. There's a message that I've found repeatedly through my studies of the scriptures, and it is, I am still here, which can be anagrammed to some interesting phrases, one of which is iller atheism. Another is regarding ill atheism. There's a sickness. Breaking the spell reveals the bad spell we're under. One good spell deserves another. In esoteric Christianity, Christ is the logos of God. In Gnostic texts, this is also referred to as the limit. We can see here a series of related anagrams for the same simple phrase. This is a sickness and a cure embedded here. I am still here. Now, you might be sick, i.e., think that I'm gone, non-existent. But I am still here is the message, and I provide the ineffable Creator a vessel of human limitation, the limit in which it can move here on earth. The Creator knows intimately what it's like to be human due to a self-imposed limitation, God plus human, God as humanity, the limit or the logos. Limiter heals is another anagram for I am still here. That is the message. When you feel lost, when you feel alone, and then you get with the wrong collective, which is also lost and alone, you resurrect that spirit of resentment. I've seen Antifa members dress in hockey pads and carry bats and batons in all black, as if they're Batman. If you remember Batman Begins, Batman travels to the Far East and is trained by a secret society that uses terrorism to create order out of chaos. The League of Shadows is a hybrid of ISIS and Freemasonry, and throughout Freemason iconography are images we associate with Islam. So is Freemason Islamic? Is Islam Freemason? I think actually the iconography comes through the spirit that is channeled when people are engaging in these collective, destructive, and let's say weaponized victimhood-based mentalities. So the ninja ISIS overlap embeds that as well. I am still here. Regarding the ill atheism, the limiter heals. That's a message here. Let's go to Dr. King.
Malcolm X, one of the most articulate exponents of the black Muslim philosophy, has said of your movement and your philosophy that it plays into the hands of the white oppressors, that they are happy to hear you talk about love for the oppressor because this disarms the Negro and fits into the stereotype of the Negro as a meek, turning the other cheek sort of creature. Would you care to comment on Mr. X's beliefs?
Well, I don't think of love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. I don't think of it as a weak force. But I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful direct action. This is what I tried to teach in the struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing. That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. Non-resistance leaves you in a state of stagnant passivity and deadened complacency, wherein non-violent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner. And I think some of the criticisms of nonviolence, or some of the critics, fail to realize that we are talking about something very strong, and they confuse non-resistance with nonviolent resistance.
He goes beyond that in some of the things I've heard him say that this is deliberately your philosophy of love of the oppressor, which he identifies completely with the nonviolent movement, he says is this philosophy and this movement are actually encouraged by whites because it makes them comfortable. It makes them believe that Negroes are meek, supine creatures.
Well, I don't think that's true. If anyone has ever lived with a nonviolent movement in the South, from Montgomery on through the Freedom Rides and through the sit-in movement and the recent Birmingham movement, and see the reactions of many of the extremists and reactionaries in the white community, he wouldn't say that this movement or this philosophy makes them comfortable. I think it arouses a sense of shame within them often, in many instances. I think it does something to touch the conscience and establish a sense of guilt. Now, so often people respond to guilt by engaging more in the guilt-evoking act in an attempt to drown the sense of guilt. But this approach certainly doesn't make the white man feel comfortable. I think it does the other thing. It disturbs this conscience, and it disturbs this sense of contentment that he's had.
Now, what does he mean there? Well, number one, he teaches us that that never was a real serpent. It was not a real serpent that went into the garden. What was it? But as you know, the Bible is written in symbols and parables, and this serpent or snake is a symbol that's used to hide the real identity of the one whom that actually was. Well, who was it? The white man. Now, is this your standard teaching? Yes. He teaches us that the black man by nature is divine. Now, does this mean that the white man by nature is evil? By nature he is other than divine. Well, now, does this mean that he's evil? Can he do good? By nature he is evil. He cannot do good. History is thus qualified to reward all research, and we don't have any historic example where we have found that they collectively as a people have done good. Do you teach them what you just said to me, that the white man is the symbol of evil? If you can go to any little Muslim child and ask him where is hell or who is the devil, and he wouldn't tell you that hell is down in the ground or that the devil is something invisible that you can't see. He'll tell you hell is right where he has been catching it, and he'll tell you who the one who is responsible for him having received this hell is the devil. And he would say that this devil is the white man. Yes.
So there's a lovely Jewish idea, an ancient idea.
Yes.
It's one of the most profound ideas I've ever come across. And so it's a kind of a Zen koan, and here it is that, so it's a question about the classic attributes of God, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. What does a being with those three attributes lack? You think, well, what kind of question is that? And the answer is limitation.
Yeah.
And the second answer is that's the justification for being.
Yeah.
Is that the unlimited lacks the limited.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
the limited is us.
For anything to come into existence, there needs to be an element of resistance. And so things are never predicated on one pole of what is always a dipole.
Right.
Everything has that dipole.
Yeah, it's like a
structure.
prerequisite for being.
It is, and it's imaged in the yin-yang idea. But it seems to me very important, because in our culture we often seem to suppose that certain things are just good and other things are just bad, and it would be good if we could get rid of the bad ones. But actually, by pursuing certain good things that are good within measure too far, they become bad, and so forth.
In a nutshell, what Martin Luther King was getting at is the nonviolent resistance that he utilized maintained the dignity of the oppressed, who also were able to resist the oppressor. It's kind of hard to look in the eyes of these people who maintain their dignity and not feel guilt and shame if you're a part of the offending, oppressive committee. What happens when people follow agitators out into the street and set things on fire? They end up confirming the bias and bigotry of the people doing the oppressing, and it maintains this ego monster, and that spirit of the age continues to move through these people. I know you're all wondering, what does this have to do with the 1994 LP from REM, Monster? Consider this was an album from REM. They're kind of like what I would call in high school art fags. Michael Stipe and a couple other members are gay, artsy. They kind of created the nerdy indie rock phenomenon before it actually happened. Yet on their 1994 album Monster, they developed a kind of hard edge and sounded more like Michael Stipe's buddies in Nirvana. Now, the songs on this album embed paradigms for today. We've got the orange man, bear, pig monster on the front. That's an ego monster. You don't enter rapid eye movement until you're dreaming. We have some songs here. You, Let Me In, I Took Your Name, tellingly bang and blame. Another sound effect word in comic books other than bang is blam. So B-L-A-M, exclamation point. And then we've got exclamation point and E. That would be the difference between bang, blam, and blame. and E with an exclamation point is the icon for entertainment. Someone finds this to be artistic, entertaining, and funny. And in order to develop a thick skin, I want to help you learn how to take the piss out of all of this by seeing the joke embedded here. Let's take a look at *69 has me thinking of inversions. If we look at the song list backwards, You Let Me In, I Took Your Name, then we Bang and Blame, Tongue and Strange Currencies, you're giving lip service to something for money, *69, you're dancing with the stars, spinning around, I Don't Sleep, I Dream, so I'm not sleeping, I'm woke, but I'm dreaming, you woke up to the dream, Kings of Comedy, Crush with Eyeliner. That seems like a reference to the fact that many of the paradigms that are sold to the black community are sold to them by effeminate, artistic black comedians, men, like Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, Chris Rock, Kevin Hart. If you can't tell those guys are gay and blacken it up for you, I don't know what the hell's wrong with you, but yeah, they're gayer than a pair of red clown shoes. When I think of REM, I also think of remember. So this is a dreamlike nature that we exist in, where it seems like patterns are playing out. So what's going to happen is already something that happened already. BLM plus the scarlet letter on the witch spells blam.
Black Lives Matter is ran by 3 witches.
So when we take the BLM, Black Lives Matter, and we combine that with the A and E, the arts and entertainment, we get elite agents, black provocateurs, basically creating a modern-day witch hunt for Man-Bear-Pig.
There is something out there which threatens our very existence and may be the end to the human race as we know it. I'm talking, of course, about Man-Bear-Pig.
Man-Bear-Pig?
It is a creature which roams the earth alone. It is half man, half bear, and half pig. Some people say that Man-Bear-Pig isn't real. Well, I'm here to tell you now, Man-Bear-Pig is very real, and he most certainly exists. I'm Cereal. Man-Bear-Pig doesn't care who you are or what you've done. Man-Bear-Pig simply wants to get you. I'm Super Cereal. But have no fear, because I am here to save you. And someday, when the world is rid of Man-Bear-Pig, everyone will say, "Thank you, Al Gore. You're super awesome." The end.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gore.
Thank you, class. Excelsior!
There's a scene in the Gospels where Jesus encounters a demon, pulls him out of a man, and puts him into some pigs, who then kill themselves.
Jesus, Son of the Most High God, what do you want with me? I beg you, don't punish me.
What is your name?
Legion. Lord, we beg you, do not send us into the abyss. Into the herd of swine.
Hey! Come back! Stop! Stop!
And the demons went out of the man and into the pigs.
Go away from here! You magician! Leave us! Go away from this place! Leave us! Go away from here!
Most of the people in the scriptures, when they first encounter Christ, accuse him of being in league with the devil or being demonically possessed.
Bring her forward.
I'm not a witch, I'm not a witch.
But you are dressed as one.
They dressed me up like this. And this isn't my nose, it's a false one.
Well, we did do the nose.
The nose?
And the hat. But she's a witch.
Did you dress her up like this?
No!
No!
Yes, a bit.
Let's just say, just putting this out there, maybe life's not fair. And maybe you let it get the best of you. And maybe you're not exactly where you want to be. Maybe things aren't just how you want them. Maybe that's an infantile desire to begin with. But let's just say you're complacent or, less than. And the haves and the have-nots are at war with each other. It's a lot easier to just blame Man-Bear-Pig instead of ending the witch hunt and looking in the mirror.
Some people say that Man-Bear-Pig isn't real. Well, I'm here to tell you now, Man-Bear-Pig is very real, and he most certainly exists. I'm serial. Man-Bear-Pig doesn't care who you are or what you've done. Man-Bear-Pig simply wants to get you. I'm super serial. But have no fear, because I am here to save you. And someday, when the world is rid of Man-Bear-Pig, everyone will say,
Big coat! Big coat! Yes! I'm sorry, it's a new coat! It's Gore-Tex!
You better be careful with that thing. You'll start a war.
See, the key to eating a black and white cookie, Elaine, is you want to get some black and some white in each bite. Nothing mixes better than vanilla and chocolate. And yet still somehow racial harmony eludes us. If people would only look to the cookie, all our problems would be solved.
Oh, your views on race relations are just fascinating. You really should do an op-ed piece for the Times.
Look to the cookie, Elaine. Look to the cookie.
Oh, what is this?
What?
It's a hair.
Oh, take it back. Let's get another one.
No, what late as it is, I'll just take it off.
No, come on, really, get another one. It'll take a second.
All right. Excuse me.
Hey, I'm online here.
No, we just bought this. You sold us a cape with that hair on it.
You have to take a number.
Did you have insurance?
Yeah, but it was through a friend.
But will you be covered?
I don't know.
Well, the insurance company will appoint a lawyer for you if you get sued. But when you get sued, you may be, I don't know what your policy is. When you get sued above your policy, if you have a policy, then you're going to have to contact a lawyer.
Right.
I don't handle cases like that.
Right, but is it possible in any way then to sue you people?
Sue who?
You. I'm asking you for help.
Sue who? Me?
Yes.
Why do you want to sue me?
Well, I'm trying to explain. I had a terrible accident.
What's that got to do with me?
Well, I'm asking you for help, and maybe I could sue for punitive damages that you're giving me.
I'm giving you?
Yes.
Me?
Yes.
What'd I do to you?
Well, punitive damages here.
I'm a lawyer. What did I do to you?
The sidecar smashed into a pole and everything. I'm trying to explain this to you.
What's that? You want to sue me?
Well, why not?
Me?
Sue everybody.
Sir, I can't help you.